Welcome back to Jacques in the garden. It is a beautiful spring day. The birds are chirping away and the garden is full of colors and blooms. Now, the only problem is that some of the blooms are actually blooms I don't really want, and that is this bed full of flowering broccoli. It is the season now where winter has transitioned into spring and summer, and the broccoli plants cannot handle the heat any longer, and they are just producing flowers for me. So, in this video, I'm going to show you how to remove a winter garden bed like this, how to transition the soil, refresh the bed. I'm also going to show you exactly what I plant in here and why I'm planting it the way that I am. So we have a lot to do today, so let's get started by getting all of this flowering broccoli out of here. The first thing we have to do is get rid of the plants that are already in this bed. Now, you don't actually have to remove everything before planting into it. You could even plant around it. But when your plants are at this level where they're already bolting and you already have plans to fully replant this bed anyway, I would suggest just going ahead and clearing the entire thing at once. It'll make your planting much easier and also be much easier to address anything you want to address to the bed in question. So why do I have loppers? Well, it's because when I remove plants, I don't like to just pull them up. I like to leave as many roots in the ground as possible. But there is an important distinction here. When it comes to terminating brassicas, if you were to cut this at just the surface level and a little bit of the stem was above ground, it would actually regrow. So it's not going to be terminated. It's still going to compete with the rest of your plants, and the roots will not break down underground in the soil. So what do? Well, then you have to make sure that you're cutting it at just beneath the soil level. So what do I have here? I have my brassica plant. This is a broccoli. I'm going to just pop that out of the way. And then what I have here is the stem. I could see all the roots forming at the surface here. So I'm going to take my loppers. I'm going to push it into the soil, and then I'm going to cut. So then when I remove this, I do have a little bit of roots because this plant in particular fell over and started rooting where it contacted the soil. But now I've ensured that whatever's left in the ground should break down without any problem whatsoever. And I could be sure that when I plant here, it's not going to compete. So that's the first thing I'm going to do here is go through this bed and chop all of these brassica plants at just beneath the soil level, and then we'll move on to addressing the bed itself. I also want to note that I'm going to be leaving this California poppy here because it is too beautiful for me to remove. I love these apricot style blooms, and I do love zeolite calendula. They also have an apricot style bloom, but the thing is that this plant is going to continue to grow. It's not going to get that much bigger at this point in the year, and it's going to become a powdery mildew magnet. It already has a lot of powdery mildew on it. I find calendula is very susceptible to it, so I'm opting for a reset on the bed entirely. I'll probably remove the huge calendula here as well, just because it's gotten a little bit too sloppy. So I'm gonna go ahead, chop out the rest of these plants, and then we'll take a look at the seedlings, because I am super proud of my seedlings this year. I think it's the best plants that I've ever produced, and I'm very curious to hear your guys' takes on that as well. My chickens love bolted brassica, so I'm going to go ahead and toss over a couple of these. The rest I'm going to chop up and add to the compost pile. I'm deep in the greenhouse surrounded by incredible seedlings. This is probably the best seedling year I've ever had, as I mentioned. And even around me right now, I have 6 flats of peppers. My most successful pepper seedling year by far. They also just look incredibly vigorous and healthy. Now, the ones that I have potted up that I know for sure I want to use are in 4 cells, the 3-inch 4 cells, not the deeper ones. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 flats that are fully potted up. But let me give you guys a little comparison. Even the ones that are in the 6 cells are looking quite wonderful. So there's a 6 cell, not a lot of soil. You'll notice that there's not a lot of branching here. There's no flowers forming. They're just kind of growing vertically. Now, as the ones that are potted up into the 3-inch 4 cells, there's actually branching occurring. So you can see right there, there's a young new leaf coming up. There's also young flowers already on these peppers. So this is exactly like, this is I don't even know how much money I would pay for seedlings like this. They are absolutely incredible. There's no signs of nutrient deficiency, even though they're just in these 3-inch pots. Let me loosen this up and I'll show you what it looks like. One of the cool things about this is that even though they're in here, they're just now starting to actually root up and take over the soil block. The nice thing is that with the 4 cells, they have that little slot cut on the sides. So these roots aren't actually wrapping around. If you look carefully, you'll see that they're going straight down. So what that means is that this is going to go in the ground and do really well right off the bat. One thing I did differently this year with potting up my seedlings is I mixed in a little bit of sand, and I don't know if I'm going to give it that much credit, but I could see the sand grains in here distributed. I think it's helping the roots form. The other thing I did is I made sure to liquid fertilize feed these plants on a semi-regular basis, like once a week. That's how you get them to actually branch. That's how you get them to form flowers and not just grow green and vertical. So these are prime pepper seedlings. That's going to be a good chunk of what we're planting. But now let me show you the tomato seedlings because they're also going in that same bed. And here are the tomato seedlings that have been potted up. I have 3 trays and they are in the 5-inch epic pots. So they're 8 per tray, so 24 fully mature, absolutely wonderful, healthy looking tomato seedlings. And I am so stoked for this season because they just look so vibrant. They look dark green. I've made sure to pot them up on a regular basis instead of leaving them in smaller pots to languish for too long. And it's really paid off. These look really incredible. They're going to take off and be super vigorous. So we have tomatoes, we have peppers. I might have a couple random flowers. I will admit I was caught off guard a bit, but I do have some of those marigolds that we started in my indoor seed starting video. So we have plenty of options here. So let's go back to the bed, assess the soil, and talk about how we want to prepare it. One of the things to consider here about this particular bed is that it's going to be growing peppers and tomatoes. And here in my climate, that means that this bed's going to be active for 6 to 8 months. I'm talking deep into November. So whatever I do here, it's going to be here for the long haul. And I want this bed to look good and be ready to persist for that entire season. So the first thing I'm going to do here is start lifting up some of this irrigation, folding it back to get it completely out of the way. Once that's done, I'm going to go around the entirety of the bed with a rake or something like it and pull away as much of the wood chips as I possibly can. That way, when we are assessing the soil and actually working on the soil, if we do elect to do that, we won't be mixing in any wood chips accidentally into the soil, which in general is bad practice. I do like having the wood chips in the pathways to retain moisture, but whenever I'm working on the bed, I do like to scoot them back a little bit so I could actually make sure I could focus on the soil, and then we'll move the wood chips back in to define the garden itself. We've now moved all the mulch away, the irrigation lines are out, and the only plant left is my Chilano pepper, which is one of my favorites, and I ran out of seeds this year, so I'm not messing with that guy. Now, traditionally, I have always opted to broad fork or fork the soil, and I feel like this year, I don't really want to. I don't really have a good reason for that, but something about my vibes and my feelings on it is to not do it. So what are we gonna do instead? Well, I still want to add some level of mulch in here. My goal this year is to save water, but I'm also planting peppers and tomatoes, which love the heat. So having a nice dark soil like this that heats up very quickly is ideal. So what are we going to do? Well, you'll see exactly what my solution to that is. The first step for me is going to be defining the sort of shape and edges of this bed and also trying to loosen up the soil surface a little bit. So what I have here is this potato fork. What I'm going to do is try to distribute any of the high points to low points, and we're gonna just go from there. So the goal here, and the reason why I don't want a broad fork, is that it's been a very dry year. It's something I've been sort of talking about / complaining about for a while now. And if I were to broad fork, I do get the advantage of getting some oxygen deeper into the soil and maybe bringing some organic matter down a little deeper as well. But as a consequence, I also will have the soil dry out much faster. And I don't expect to get any more rain really for this season. So I want to conserve as much moisture as I possibly can. In terms of fertilizer, what I'm using today is the Fox Farm Happy Frog Tomato and Vegetable Fertilizer. This is a pretty well-rounded fertilizer. It has 5-7-3, so 5 for nitrogen, which is great for the early season growth of these tomatoes and peppers. Then we have 7 for phosphorus, which is the main sort of thing that helps promote fruiting and flowering in plants. And then 3 for the potassium, which is just overall a necessary nutrient for plants. It's also great for roots and overall strength of the plant. So how much of this are we going to apply? Well, we're going to follow the instructions. That is my new sort of philosophy now, is to try to actually get the most out of my garden by putting the appropriate amount of fertilizer. So here it says that we want for a new bed planting like this, 2 cups of the fertilizer for every 10 square feet. And then after that, every 3 to 4 weeks, for tomatoes and peppers, it says another 2 cups. I don't know if I'm going to be adding it that frequently throughout the entire season because I'll probably do a combination of liquid and dry fertilizers. But for this bed, this is a roughly 10 by 3 size bed, maybe 10 by 4 at the most. And so what we want here is, that's 30 square feet, so we want at least 6 cups. Now this right here will hold 1, 2, 3, 4 cups in total. So let's start by filling that up. And that'll be the majority of the fertilizer, and then we'll go ahead and get another 2 cups. So this amount of fertilizer here should be enough to cover 2/3 of the bed. So what I'm going to do is try to scatter it as evenly as I can, working my way up to just before this pepper plant. And at that point, I should be done with the amount I have in here. So there we have 2/3 of the bed fertilized. Let me get 2 more cups. All the fertilizer has been pretty evenly spread throughout the bed, but what I want to do now is actually try to mix it into the top surface level of the soil. That's going to do a couple different things. First, it's going to stop it from getting blown or washed away. It's going to hide it a little bit, so any digging pests, things like skunks and raccoons and possums actually do like eating fertilizer, which is probably not great for them. So we want to try to hide it as best we can. It's also going to ensure that it gets adequate moisture to break down and really feed these plants. Remember, this is an organic-based fertilizer, which means that something in the soil has to break it down to make it available to the plants. So we want to give it a good soil contact, make sure it's in an active zone of the actual soil, and that is pretty much all we have to do. So I'm going to grab my fork and we're going to chop this in, and then we're going to start burying it. So now what I'm going to do is apply compost across the surface of the bed. And the reason why I'm hand scattering it is because I don't want to rely on the rake to move it, because again, I don't want to mess up any of the distribution of nutrients that we've already added in. So just going to give it a nice little thorough sprinkling here. And our goal is to get to not anything crazy. There's plenty of organic matter in this bed, as you guys can already see probably. So we're looking for something like a 1/2 inch to an inch. Now that our bed is fully amended, it's got the compost, it's got the fertilizer, what I want to do is tuck it back in to make sure that as much water as I could possibly save is being trapped. So we're going to go back in with the mulch. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be using this old mulch because it's more broken down, it's finer, it's already soaked up some amount of water, so it already has some built-in water capacity. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to be spreading a fresh layer of wood chip mulch around this bed to help seal in that moisture, add some more thickness to my pathway mulch, and make sure that I'm not losing any water due to osmosis or capillary action into the dry pathways from my raised bed. This is one of the things I've really considered a lot lately, is that by having bare dirt exposed, even if it's not in your garden bed and right next to it, what it's going to do is just naturally start pulling away water from your garden. So by having really deep mulch in my pathways, I should be able to reduce that loss of water pretty substantially. Before we remulch the bed, I'm going to go ahead and rerun my irrigation lines, make sure everything looks nice and even, and then we'll get everything tucked in. The time has finally come to plant these peppers and tomatoes out. And the overall strategy here is that I have mostly bell peppers and mostly sweet peppers. I guess that kind of goes hand in hand there. In terms of the tomatoes, I have a total of 6 that we're able to fit in this roughly 10-foot bed. And they're going to be 1/2 and 1/2 hybrid, 1/2 and 1/2 heirloom. I don't know why. That's just kind of how I looked at the list of plants that I had available, and that's basically what I decided to go for. Now, I don't know if they're going to grow at different rates, if one's going to be more vigorous or the other one's going to beat it, because overall, these will all be grown on a Florida weave system, so they are going to have to learn how to get along with each other. So without further ado, let's start by laying out all these plants so we could get a rough idea of its spacing. I'll start by putting the tomatoes in their pots on the back there, and then I'll start taking peppers out of their pots and laying the actual seedling plug out so you guys could get a visual understanding of what my spacing is and why I'm going for that. So that's what 6 tomatoes spaced roughly 20 inches apart looks like. Ideally, I would go for 24 inches, but 4 inches shouldn't kill these tomatoes whatsoever. So I think they'll probably be fine. Every year I lie to you guys and say that I'm going to space my plants out further, and while I would like to overall try to do that with tomatoes, see if they get a little bit healthier, I just really don't have the space for the amount of varieties that I want to grow. So that is what we're going for. Now, in terms of the pepper seedlings, one of the things I wanted to share with you guys is that if you have a seedling and you're trying to get it out, there is the bottom hole, which makes it quite easy. But another thing you could do to make it even easier is to just take your hand, slap each side of the forecell. You don't have to hit it that hard. And if you do that, what's going to happen is that the seedling is going to pop out much easier and you're less likely to make a mess. So let's now do the pepper spacing, because this one's going to be pretty dang tight. One thing I want to mention before we get into the planting of the peppers is that before I brought both the tomatoes and peppers out, I watered them both in with a full strength liquid fertilizer focused on fruiting and flowering to give them a little bit of a boost once they go into the ground right away. So how are we going to do the peppers? We're going to be planting them pretty tightly together. There's a few different reasons for this. The first one being that peppers actually do want a little bit of shade, which is also one of the reasons why I have the tomatoes back there. If you take a look now, right here, I'm already getting a shadow from that tomato plant. And of course, as they get bigger, they're going to get much taller than the peppers, and they're going to cast spotted shadows throughout this entire bed. Now, that's fine because the way that the sun is oriented in my garden, this bed is essentially perfectly south-north. So what's going to happen is that as the sun sets in the west, once it gets to right about now, 3:30, actually almost 4 o'clock, it's 3:45. So once we get past 4, we will start getting a more severe shadow, but that's fine because that means that from the morning when the sun rises, let's say 6 a.m. up until 4, that is essentially full sun hitting this side of the bed, and that is all good. That is enough sun that these peppers should be able to thrive and flourish. So in terms of the spacing themselves, a lot of people will go up to 18 to 24 inches per pepper. I am actually going to be going a lot smaller, basically half that, somewhere between 9 and 12 inches per pepper. That way they could start to shade each other. And another reason why you really want shade is especially if you're growing bell peppers. And most of these are bell peppers. And the reason for that is that bell peppers are really susceptible to sun scalding, which is when you get that sort of yellow brown spot on the pepper that kind of burns through, and it can stop you from getting to a red ripe stage pepper. So by planting them close together, these peppers will also cast a little bit of shadow on each other. The leaves will help overlap on each other, and that way every single pepper hopefully gets a little bit of shade at the very least. So we're gonna go 1 right there, and then I have 4 here per tray. And so I'm thinking I'll probably end up actually planting a total of 4 of each variety. My goal this year is to grow more sweet peppers, which is all of these. Every single one that I'm planting here is a sweet pepper, as I mentioned. And the other goal is to have enough that I could actually do something with. So instead of just planting like a smattering of random pepper plants, I want to go ahead and get as many as I can close together so I could harvest them together and do more interesting things in the kitchen, like making paprika all from one type of pepper. Now I am saying that these are flopping over, so we might not actually be able to lay these out. I'm probably going to have to plant as I go. So what I'm going to do here is I'll give you a little visual of the spacing, and let me get my tape measure. So currently the way that those 2 peppers are, from stem to stem, which is the most important measurement for actual spacing here, we're at just over 10 inches. So what am I gonna do? I'm actually going to commit to that 10-inch spacing. I feel like that's pretty good. I like that they're far apart. You could see that the leaves are almost touching, and as this starts to branch, the leaves will definitely touch, which is also what I've called before peppers holding hands. And that's the idea that, again, peppers actually do like to be planted close together. They like to flop, as that one is flopping right now. And by having them right next to each other, they could also act as sort of mini trellises for each other. So there's a lot of different reasons to do it this way, and I'm definitely going to be doing it for that particular reason. Since my plan of showing you guys all the peppers lined up isn't going to pan out, I'm going to have to plant. And what I'm going to do is in each hole, I'm going to put a little bit of this. And this is just a mixture of worm castings and azomite. Now, this is optional. Pretty much everything I'm doing is optional. I'm a little bit over the top when it comes to tomatoes and peppers, but I feel like they are an investment. They are the plants that, to me, produce the most expensive purchase in the grocery store and also the most flavorful. So I want to maximize my benefits in every way that I can. The worm castings will help add a little biology. The azomite will add a little bit of trace minerals. If there's anything missing that the pepper tomato needs, this should be covered by whatever's in here, plus also the fertilizer that we added at the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and start planting. When it comes to planting peppers, also note that you can plant them a little bit deep if you want, as long as they don't look woody. These are starting to get mature, so they are actually getting woody. You could see that they're starting to have like that kind of bark-like appearance. So in this case, I will not be planting them deep because they are a little bit woody. Since we're doing the same distance on all of these pepper plants, I don't want to have to drag this thing around. So I just cut out a little bamboo stake to 10 inches. And now this is going to be my spacing guide. And whenever I put this apart like that, that's going to represent 10 inches, and that's going to give me perfect plant spacing without any fussing around. I just realized I should tell you guys what I'm planting. The first 4 there is called Ace. It is a bell pepper, a new one that I haven't tried before. So we're just trying to see if it works for me. This one that I'm putting in next is Paprika Alma. This is the one that I'm excited for to make actual paprika out of. It's a specialty variety designed for just that. Next up is a Bulgarian pepper called Kapia Krtovoska. So nothing that you guys would be familiar with, but we'll see what it looks like once harvest time is ready. Next up, we got a lunchbox pepper called SVP from Johnny's. This is, I think, a mixed color one. I don't know if it's a specific red or orange, but I do really like those little lunchbox peppers you get in the bag by the pound. So I decided this year I'm going to try to grow them. Next up, I've got the Frodo pepper, which is a bell pepper that I believe was one that didn't need as much heat, which is why I went for it. Here in San Diego, even though we're zone 10B, we don't get that hot in the summertime. It's pretty toasty right now. I think we're in the low 80s, but it's really not going to get that much hotter than that. We've got just enough space for one more pack of 4 peppers, and that is going to be the Gypsy Queen, another bell. And now it's time to plant these tomatoes. Now, the one thing I'm going to do is bury them very slightly deep. I don't think it's worth burying them too deep, as we've learned in the experiment that I did with Kevin over at his place. We basically found that in the early season, aka now, before the soil has really heated up down deep, there's really no advantage to going extra deep because you're just putting your roots into colder soil, which is going to just slow those plants down. So I'm not going to plant it on the surface level because there is still a little bit of flop. It's kind of a hard thing to avoid when you're planting so many tomatoes in trays close together. They don't get enough wind to move them around. So I am going to bury them, but I'm only going to bury them maybe about 3 to 4 inches deeper than they already are, to give them a little bit of extra anchorage and also to encourage a little bit of extra root production, just enough that I could get past that initial layer of compost that we added and get some roots deeper below into the subsoil. So let's go ahead and get this in. And remember, these are just about 20 inches apart, and it is a little bit tight. 24 would be better, but we should be able to get away with it okay. Right there is a great looking root ball for the tomatoes. They're all the way out the bottom. They're hitting every single side. They're shooting straight down, and they have filled out the soil blank. So this is pretty perfect. At least for me, that's exactly what I want to see. So there we go. We've planted it, and again, like I said, I'm roughly 3 inches beneath the level where they were in the pot to begin with. So then I'm going to go ahead, cover this back up, and now we've got our tomato in the ground, and it's so exciting. I cannot wait to see the production from this bed. Let's get the other 5 tomatoes in. One quick thing I want to point out is that the root ball of these tomato plants indicates to me at least that they could sit in these containers for at least another week or 2 and they would be just fine. There's no tangling of roots, they're not sitting on top of each other, so they could have actually waited another week or 2 if you wanted to, but in this case I had an unproductive bed of flowering broccoli. There's really no reason for me to not plant these tomatoes. It's really just time to get them in the ground. The tomatoes, by the way, that I planted are Harvest Moon, Italian Heirloom, Benevito, Nepal, Big Beef Plus, and then Money Maker at the end. So actually half of these I think are new to me. I've grown Harvest Moon, I've grown Italian Heirloom, I've grown Big Beef. So yeah, actually the other 3 are totally new to me. So we'll see how they do. But right now we've got our tomatoes and peppers in the ground. It's exciting. Let me go grab some companion plants and we'll fill this bed up. As I mentioned, I don't have that many companions ready right now. I got so focused on peppers and tomatoes that I literally forgot to start the rest of my garden. Don't worry, the seeds are up. They're just a little bit too small to transplant. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to use what we have, which is a 6-pack of French marigolds and 3 6-packs of different lettuce that I started from seed. Now here's going to be the strategy. For the tomatoes, that is where the marigolds are going to go because the French marigolds help protect tomatoes from actual root knot nematodes, which is a pest that I have probably talked about too much now. So we're gonna go ahead and put one of these in front of each one of these tomatoes. The reason why I'm putting them in front, not in between, is because I actually still have to install my Florida weave, and I don't want to have to remove these marigolds if I happen to put one right where I'm going to put a stake. So each tomato is going to get one of these marigold seedlings in front of it, and then I'll show you exactly where I put the lettuce. For the lettuce, what I'm actually going to do is very simply put one in between each one of these pepper plants. That way the peppers will throw some shade on the lettuce. The lettuce in no way is going to be able to outcompete these peppers. I'll be able to harvest that lettuce out in probably about 30-ish days, at least a baby head, maybe 30 to 45 to 60 days for a fully mature head. At that point, the peppers will be flowering, they will start to have produced, and I will be able to harvest out all the lettuce and free up space for the pepper plants. So just going to take one, pop it right in the middle of each one of these peppers. And by the way, we ended up with 24 peppers in the ground. Once I get these lettuce seedlings in, there's one final step I'm going to do, actually 2 final steps, one for the tomatoes and one for the peppers. One other thing I'll mention is that all of these lettuce varieties are different, so they're not all going to be ripe at once, which is perfect. I'll be able to harvest one after the other after the next, and that way hopefully I won't be drowning in lettuce and I should be able to manage eating through all of this. As I mentioned, these tomatoes are going to be grown on a Florida weave system, which if you guys haven't seen, I have a couple videos on. But for now, before we get to the actual Florida weave coming up, I do like to stake my tomatoes at the beginning for a few different reasons. The main one is that while they're still young, I don't want them to have any chance of getting damaged by a random animal that might be digging through the garden or just anything that could happen. I want to make sure that they're supported and anchored in the best way that they could possibly be. The other thing is that I want to make sure that they stay vertical. I don't want them to start drifting in the Florida weave. So I actually leave these poles in the ground with the tomato plants even after the weave is already in, to make sure that at least the varieties are vertical for the first couple feet and don't start spilling into each other. So we're going to go ahead, take these stakes. I'm going to go straight down, just like that, have a couple feet sticking out of the ground, and then I'm going to just loosely tie this tomato to the stake. All I'm trying to do here is keep it vertical. I don't care if it's tight. I want to just make sure it has a little bit of support so that nothing could actually harm this plant in the future. So there is one more thing I'm going to do to these tomatoes, and as you can see, I've already started, and that is mulching them. I am applying a very thin layer of straw mulch. Now, why am I doing a thin layer? Well, because I don't want it to be so thick that it's actually going to cool the soil down, at least at this point in the year. Here in San Diego, as I alluded to earlier, it does get hot, but it doesn't get hot quickly. So I probably won't be experiencing true summer temperatures until I get much closer to, like, say, July. So for now, I am covering up this back half where the tomatoes are because I don't want them to dry out. The tomatoes are going to be much more vigorous. They're also more susceptible to soil-borne diseases, which can spread to the plant if it is unmulched, and the soil could splash back onto the surface of the tomato leaves. Now for the peppers, as I mentioned, they don't like sun, but they do love the heat. So by leaving that surface exposed, unmulched as it is right now with the compost, that is going to heat up much quicker in the morning, stay hotter through the daytime, and allow these peppers to really get a kickstart in their growth. Then once summer truly kicks in and those temperatures stay consistently in the 80s and my soil starts to dry out too quickly, I'll come back through, I'll mulch the peppers, and I'll also re-mulch the tomatoes to a much thicker depth. At this point, I'm just trying to do a skim layer to stop evaporation and try to reduce splashback as much as I can. But other than that, I'm not going to stake the pepper plants. I usually don't bother unless they are showing me that they need to be, like let's say they have way too much fruit or it's really windy and they start to get blown over, but that's really all they need. They don't really need that much. Now, the other thing I'll mention is that if it were a colder year, and so far it's actually been quite hot this year, what I would do is I would build a wind block around these pepper plants. It's actually something I've done for the past 2 years, but the past 2 years were much cooler at this point in the year. So far it's been quite warm. I know we're in a heat wave right now, but for now, I really don't feel like I need to give them any additional heat aside from the compost mulch on the surface, which should help heat up that soil. So I'm gonna finish mulching up these tomatoes, and then I've got a whole lot of other peppers to plant. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys learned something, and let me know what you guys want to see next. If you want to see my pepper technique for growing them much faster, I'll link that video right over here because it did work really well. And if you're in a colder climate, it should make a huge difference for you.